First thing we're going to do is go through the different parts of the anatomy for the head and neck for swallowing. So we'll start with the lips. They're right here in the front. We use the teeth. The teeth are attached to the jaw, which is the mandible down here, the maxilla up at the top. We have the tongue, which is in the oral cavity, and the oral cavity is really just this big cavernous space here. We have the hard palate, and this designates two parts of the hard palate, the alveolar ridge, which we'll talk about more with articulation, and then the soft palate here in the back. And remember, the soft palate is that squishy part when you push your tongue to the roof of your mouth. Down here in the throat, we have the pharynx. The pharynx really begins up here as three parts: the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the hypopharynx. The nasopharynx attaches to the nasal cavity, the oropharynx is attached to the oral cavity, and the hypopharynx extends to the larynx. Our first tube we're going to talk about is the larynx. It's here in the front, and remember, the larynx is for air, and it helps protect the airway during swallowing. We have in the back the esophagus, and the esophagus is closed at rest and opens up during swallowing, and it's here in the back to let food pass to the stomach. So let's go through the different roles for our anatomy. For our lips, they're really just a containment to keep food and liquids from spilling from the front of the mouth. The jaw, the mandible, and the maxilla are to support the teeth. The teeth break down the food as we're chewing. The tongue has many different roles. It's going to rotate to push the food onto the chewing surface of the teeth. It's also going to gather the food as it spills in our mouth into our cheek or buccal spaces, which are just the pockets on either side of our teeth. And it also pushes the food from the front to the back to get it to the pharynx during swallowing. The palate is again just another containment, so it provides the shelf to keep the food in the mouth. But the velum has a special role, so it is there to help seal the nasal cavity in the back of the throat during swallowing so that no food or liquid goes through your nose while you're swallowing. It also pushes down on the back of the tongue, so the tongue is going to push against the velum so that when we're swallowing, nothing comes into our mouth. It's really just a one-way access once the swallowing starts for that food to go down into the pharynx. Now, during swallowing, the pharynx has a role of squeezing together on all sides, so the front, the back, and the sides of the pharynx squeeze to push that food down to the epiglottis, to the esophagus. And then the epiglottis is part of our airway protection. So there are two ways that the epiglottis works to protect the airway. Number one is while we're chewing, the food is breaking down, it's spilling all over the place. If anything spills on the back of the tongue, it catches the food before it spills into the airway. Where this food is caught is called the vallecula. So the vallecula is really just a space between the back of the tongue and the epiglottis, and it's our catcher. When we go to swallow, the airway lifts and closes, and the first thing that it does is flips this epiglottis over as the tongue pushes against it. So the epiglottis is flipped over the airway. That's our first level of protection. Our second is our false vocal folds, which you can't really see in this picture, but they're going to squeeze together like a sphincter to keep any food or liquid from entering the airway that might have slipped past the epiglottis. And then the last layer of our airway protection is the true vocal folds, which are going to close together so that if anything got past level 1, the epiglottis, level 2, the false vocal folds, then those are going to squeeze together to keep kind of a shelf from things spilling into the airway. If anything spills into the airway, then we're going to cough, and as our cough response, it's going to shoot everything back out into the pharynx so that we can swallow it and send it to the esophagus. So we have gotten to the point where we're pushing that food down into the pharynx, it's squeezing, the airway is closing. Well, where is it going to go from here? Again, the esophagus is closed during swallowing, so now it's going to open up and let that food pass through. The area that opens up is known as the upper esophageal sphincter, and that is a sphincter that's closed at rest, and it opens up because of the pressure change and the lifting and closing of the airway, pulling the esophagus open to allow that food to go through. And it has two roles. Number one, to help food pass through the esophagus, starting that pressure system as it goes down to the stomach, but also to keep food from coming back up so that it doesn't come back into the pharynx. Once the food is in the esophagus, it has constrictions of the esophageal muscles. It's going to squeeze those muscles all the way down until that food gets into the stomach. And there's another sphincter at the bottom of the esophagus called the lower esophageal sphincter. The lower esophageal sphincter works just like the upper esophageal sphincter. It's closed at rest. It's going to open up, let that food pass into the stomach, and close right back again. And that keeps that food from coming out of the stomach and causing reflux. Let's take a look now at our X-ray image on the right. This is a still image of someone sitting at an X-ray. It's the first image that we get during a modified barium swallow study, so that we can see if the structures are present or absent. So if you're looking at this, the kind of the light gray areas are just the skin and any tissue surrounding the bones. The darker areas are going to be the bones. You can see the skull here, the spine in the back, just a light coloring of the maxilla there, and the mandible on the bottom. So the first thing, we'll start it up at the lips again. We have the lips here, this faint line. And I'm going to highlight, this is the hard palate here at the top. So let me take that away. You can see this dark area here. It's going to highlight. That's the hard palate, and it extends to the soft palate in the back. This is the tongue, and you'll see this is a very large tongue. So the tongue is not just what you see in your mouth. It also extends all the way back, attaching to the epiglottis, which is right there, highlighted in green. So remember this area here, that joint between the back of the tongue and the epiglottis is called the vallecula. That's where we're going to catch that food so it can't spill into the airway. And we have our pharynx here is our very large area. It's just a space or a cavity. We have the larynx here in the front. So let me take that away. We have this light gray area here is the larynx. And you can't quite see his vocal folds, but during the swallow study we can typically see the vocal folds, and that'll be the bottom of the larynx. And remember again, the esophagus is closed at rest, and so you don't actually see the opening of the esophagus here, but we can still highlight it. It's going to be this area here that would open up to let the food pass through. When we're talking about the upper esophageal sphincter, it's generally at C7, so that's the cervical spine for number 7. So if we go starting at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you can't actually see him, number 7. This would be the area of his esophageal sphincter that's going to open up and let that food pass through, and also keep that food from passing back into the pharynx or back flowing.